Once upon a time, in a village named Umoko, there lived a madman named Oba. Oba looked like the earth itself had spat him out. His clothes were nothing but rags clinging to his body like leaves to a dying tree. His hair was wild, shooting out in every direction like the branches of a thorn bush. His face, covered in dirt, carried a strange look, smile, half shadow. On his back was a big sack, old and worn. It sagged heavy, like it carried the weight of a secret too dark to speak. Everywhere Oba went, that sack followed like a snail and its shell. The villagers stared at him from their windows. "Who is this man?" One whispered, clutching her child closer. "He looks like he has no home, no family." Another shook her head, her voice tinged with both pity and fear. "He must be mad." Oba didn't seem to notice their whispers. He walked straight to the big Ioko tree by the market square and dropped his sack. The tree stood tall, its branches stretching wide, like a giant's arms, its bark etched with scars from years of weather and villagers carving initials. That was where Oba made his home. Mothers warned their children, stay away from that man. Mad people can harm you. The children nodded, but their eyes were curious. They wanted to know what was inside that sack. It was big, too big for a madman to carry, and it always seemed to smell of something strange, like dried leaves and burnt wood. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, the scent carried a faint metallic tang, like rust or blood. But Oba didn't bother anyone. In the mornings he begged for food. The women gave him scraps, and he nodded in thanks, his eyes never meeting theirs. In the afternoons he sat by the tree chewing on sticks or throwing stones like a child, playing a lonely game. He muttered to himself words nobody understood, and sometimes he laughed a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching underfoot. The villagers pitied him. Poor man, they said. He's harmless. But still, no one dared to touch his sack. And so, life in Umoko went on with Oba sitting quietly under the Ioko tree, his sack always by his side, guarding its secrets like a crocodile guards the river. Little did they know the rains that brought Oba to their village also carried a storm far more dangerous, a storm with sharp teeth and no mercy. One fateful day, the village woke to the sounds of roosters crowing and women starting their morning chores. Little Ada, a bright-eyed girl of 8, skipped out of her hut with a small calabash in her hand. Her mother had sent her to buy palm oil from Mama Ki's stall. "Come back quickly," Ada, her mother, called after her. "Don't stop to play." "I won't, Mama Ada," shouted her voice, like a sweet melody floating through the air, her footsteps light and carefree. But Ada didn't return. At first her mother waited patiently, thinking she had stopped to chat with her friends. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, worry began to creep into her heart. She stepped outside and called Ada. Ada. Her voice echoed through the village, bouncing off the mud walls of huts and dying in the vast silence of the surrounding bush. There was no answer. Soon neighbors joined her, searching every corner of Umuoko. They checked the market, the stream, and even the bushes near the edge of the village. But Ada was nowhere to be found. Her calabash lay abandoned by the path, as empty as the hope in her mother's heart. By evening, the whole village was buzzing with whispers. Where could she have gone? Some asked. Could an animal have taken her? Others wondered. But one question lingered in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Could it be the madman? The women gathered near the market square, their voices hushed but sharp. The strange one, someone said, always carrying that big sack. Who knows what's inside? Another shook her head. He's just a poor madman, she argued. He wouldn't harm a child. Still, the suspicion hung like a shadow over Oba. He sat under the Ioko tree, chewing on a stick. He sat under the Ioko tree, chewing on a stick, his sack resting beside him as always. He didn't seem to notice the villagers' stares or hear their whispers. When someone asked him if he had seen Ada, he simply laughed a sound that sent shivers down their spines. Mad people don't know anything, an elder said, shaking his head. Let's keep searching. Night fell, and the village was swallowed by silence, broken only by the sound of Ada's mother sobbing into the darkness. The stars blinked coldly in the sky, as if watching over a secret they would never tell. Ada was gone, and Umoko would never be the same again. The days rolled into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The memory of little Ada still haunted Umoko like a shadow that refused to fade. Her mother's cries had grown quieter, but her sorrow hung in the air, heavy like the morning mist. Life in the village tried to return to normal, but the fear never truly left. Then it happened again. It was a quiet morning when Namamdi, a bright and curious boy of 11, was sent to fetch water from the stream. His laughter had always been like the chirping of birds filling the village with joy. With his small wooden bucket in hand, he waved goodbye to his siblings. "I'll be back soon," he called, his voice full of promise. But Namdi never came back. When the sun climbed high and there was no sign of him, his mother grew worried. She sent his older brother to check the stream. The bucket was there sitting on the bank, but Namdi was gone, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. His brother ran back to the village shouting, "Namdi! Nandi is missing." The news spread quickly. The villagers gathered once again, their faces pale and their hearts racing. "Not another child," they murmured, their voices trembling. They searched the stream, the bushes, and the nearby farms, but Namdi was nowhere to be found. The fear that had been lurking now rose like a flood, drowning the village in panic. Mothers held their children close, refusing to let them out of their sight. Doors were locked as soon as the sun began to set, and the once lively village streets grew quiet and tense. As before, whispers about Oba filled the air. "It must be him," one woman said, her voice low. "He came with that sack, and since then our children have disappeared." "But he's mad," another argued. "What would a madman want with children? He's always sitting under that tree watching everything," someone else said. "What if he's pretending?" Despite the whispers, no one dared to confront Oba. He sat under the Ioko tree, as always, chewing on sticks and humming to himself. His sack ever present rested by his side, silent but suspicious. Fear spread like wildfire through Umuoko. Children no longer played outside, and even the bravest hunters hesitated to stay late in the forest. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Yet even with all their fear, the villagers kept their distance from Oba. The thought of accusing him or opening his sack was too much to bear, and so the village lived in quiet terror, as if holding its breath, waiting for the next storm to come. However, when night fell, Oba came alive. Under the shadow of the Ioko tree, he shed the mask of madness like a snake sheds its skin. His wild laugh turned to silence, his vacant stare sharp open like the blade he carried. From his sack, Oba pulled out his knife, its edge glinting in the moonlight like the teeth of a hungry beast. He moved with the quiet grace of a leopard, his feet light on the ground. The night was his shield and the darkness his ally. Oba had a plan. He wasn't mad, he was clever. The villagers' pity was his cloak, their ignorance his weapon. He knew how to pick his victims, how to lure them without a sound. Children were easy. He would hide in the shadows waiting for a small figure to pass by. Then he would leap out his dirty face, twisted in a mockery of friendliness. "Come here, little one," he would say, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have something for you, sweets, fruits, whatever you like." Too scared to scream and too tempted to run, the children followed. And when they got close enough, Oba struck quick silent. His knife moved like a viper, and the deed was done. Women were next. Those who fetched water late at night, thinking the path was safe, became his prey. Oba would sit by the roadside pretending to sleep. When they passed, he would rise like a ghost. When they passed, he would rise like a ghost and grab them before they could cry for help. Even men, strong farmers, and hunters who wandered too far into the forest weren't safe. Oba knew their routines, their weaknesses. He was patient like a spider, waiting in its web. With his sack heavier, now Oba made his way deep into the forest, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. The air here was thick, damp, and filled with the scent of decaying leaves. There, hidden among the shadows, was a small hut. This was where the ritualists waited, men with dark desires. They welcomed Oba like an old friend, their faces eager and greedy. A good worker, one would say, counting the heads. "You'll be rewarded well." Oba would collect his payment, a bundle of coins or goods, and vanish back into the night. By the time the first rooster crowed, he was back under the Ioko tree, humming and chewing on sticks, the picture of a harmless madman. No one suspected. No one dared to ask. The sack that sat beside him held the village's darkest secret, a secret Oba carried like a burden he had long grown used to. And so while the village slept, Oba thrived, his evil hidden in plain sight. Oba's secret life carried on. But even the cleverest crocodile risked the river's wrath. 3 times Oba nearly met his end, but each time he slipped away like oil on water. The first close call happened on a bright afternoon. A farmer's wife was returning from her farm, her basket filled with cassava. She walked past the Ioko tree and glanced at Oba sitting with his sack as always. Something caught her eye, dark, sticky drops sliding from the bottom of the sack. Blood. Her heart skipped a beat. She hurried home and told her husband, her words tumbling out like a broken pot. "There's blood on that madman's sack. You must go and see." The farmer gathered some men, their machetes gleaming in the sun. They marched to the Ioko tree, determined to confront Oba. But as they approached, Oba jumped to his feet, his eyes wide and wild. He began to shout, waving his arms like a mad prophet. "Leave me alone," he screamed. "The spirits are speaking to me. They will curse you if you come near." The men hesitated, fear creeping into their hearts. "Mad people have strong juju," one whispered. Slowly they backed away, leaving Oba laughing under the tree, his sack untouched. The second time was in the deep of the night. A hunter, returning from the forest, saw Oba dragging his sack through the bushes. The hunter crouched behind a tree, his curiosity burning like a flame. He followed quietly, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. Oba stopped suddenly and turned his eyes glowing like red-hot coals in the moonlight. The hunter froze, his courage melting like wax before fire. Without a word, he dropped his spear and ran back to the village, his heart pounding like a drum. I saw him, he told the villagers. His eyes were like fire. He's not mad, he's something worse. But fear kept the villagers from acting. The third close call happened one lazy afternoon. A group of boys bored with their games decided to dare each other. Let's see what's inside the madman's sack. One said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Are you mad yourself? Another asked. But they all laughed and agreed. They crept up to the Ioko tree, their footsteps as light as cat paws. Oba lay stretched out, snoring softly, his sack beside him. One boy, braver than the rest, reached out to lift the sack, but just as his fingers touched it, Oba's laughter exploded like thunder. The boys screamed, dropping their sticks and running as fast as their legs could carry them. Behind them, Oba's laughter followed, echoing like a ghost's wail. Though Oba escaped each time, these close calls began to stir the air in Ikuku. The villagers felt unease creeping in like a storm building in the distance. The Ioko tree, once just another part of the village, now loomed like a silent witness to something terrible. And Oba, the madman, sat beneath it, his sack guarding its secrets like a sleeping lion. Meanwhile, in the heart of Ikuku's palace lived Princess Adaora, the jewel of the land. Her beauty shone like the morning sun, and her kindness was as soft as the evening breeze. Everyone admired her, for she treated even the poorest villager like family. Her laughter could chase away the darkest clouds, and her heart was as big as the sky. One market day, as Adaora walked through the village with her maid, her eyes fell on Oba. He sat under the Ioko tree, his sack beside him, as always chewing on a stick and humming softly. The villagers avoided him, their fear like an invisible wall around the tree. But Adaora stopped and stared. Why does everyone avoid him? Adaora asked her maid one day. He's a madman, my princess. The maid replied, fear in her voice. People say he's dangerous. He is still a human being, Adaora said firmly. No one deserves to be treated like an animal. The next morning, Adaora brought a bowl of hot yam porridge to Oba. Here, eat, she said, her voice gentle. Oba looked up surprised. For a moment his eyes softened and he smiled a smile that seemed almost human. Thank you, he muttered, taking the food with trembling hands. From that day on, Adaora visited Oba, often bringing him food and even sitting to talk with him. She treated him like he was normal, asking about his life and listening to his mumbled answers. The villagers whispered, why is the princess spending time with the madman? They asked, does she not see how strange he is? But Adaora didn't care about the whispers. She believed in helping people no matter who they were. Her kindness shone like a beacon, but she didn't know it was drawing danger closer. Oba, beneath his mask of madness, saw Ada as more than a kind princess. He saw her as a prize, a treasure, greater than any he had ever claimed. Her head, he thought, will make me rich beyond my dreams. The ritualists will pay anything for the king's daughter. And so, while Ada's kindness grew, Oba's plans darkened. Behind every smile he gave her, there was a shadow, a hunger for the ultimate betrayal. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village and a soft golden glow, Adaora had gone to visit Oba as usual. The warm air carried the scent of roasted yams from the marketplace, and the distant hum of villagers returning home filled the evening. But when the palace gates closed and the stars filled the sky, she didn't return. Her maid, worried, went to the king. Your Majesty, she said, her voice trembling, the princess has not come back. The king's heart tightened. He ordered his guards to search the village. They went to the market, the stream, and every hut, calling Princess Adaora, Princess Adaora. But the knight answered with silence. The villagers gathered their faces pale with fear. What could have happened to her? They whispered. An old woman leaning on her walking stick spoke up. The moonlight highlighted the deep lines on her face as she pointed toward the dark forest. "Check the madman," she said, her voice firm. "His sack is always full and it smells too sweet for a madman." The guards hesitated but nodded. They marched to the Ioko tree, their torches lighting the darkness. The flickering flames cast long, eerie shadows as they approached Oba. He was there, as always, sitting with his sack. He hummed to himself, rocking back and forth like a child. "What's in your sack?" one of the guards demanded, stepping closer. Oba looked up, his eyes wide. "Spirits," he shouted, laughing. "The spirits speak to me. You cannot touch their home." But this time the guards didn't back away. They grabbed the sack, their hands firm. Oba screamed, clawing at them, but they tore it open. The village froze. Inside the sack was the head of Princess Adaora, her golden hair still shining, her face frozen in a peaceful expression. Beside her were other heads, those of the missing villagers, Chika, Emma, and more. Gasps filled the air, followed by cries of horror. The kind princess, who had only wanted to help, had become the victim of the very man she tried to save. The guards seized Oba, dragging him to the palace as he laughed wildly. The Ioko tree stood silent, its branches swaying in the night wind, as if mourning the secrets it had witnessed. The storm of sorrow and rage that followed was one Umoko would never forget. Oba was dragged to the palace, his hands bound with rough ropes, his feet stumbling on the dusty ground. The villagers followed their wails, piercing the morning air. The king sat on his throne, his face carved with grief. His beloved daughter, Princess Adaora, was gone, her life snuffed out like a candle in the wind. When Oba was thrown to the ground before him, the king's voice thundered like a storm. "You dare harm my daughter? You dare bring this darkness to my land?" His sorrow filled the room, heavy as a mountain. Oba, on his knees, looked up with a twisted smile. His wild eyes roamed the crowd. "Kill me if you must," he said, his voice steady. "But know this, I am not the only monster here." The crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the hall like the rustling of dry leaves. "What do you mean?" the king demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Oba laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You call me evil, but your own greed feeds the ritualists. You sell your lands, your children's future, for promises of wealth and power. Without you, there would be no market for the heads I brought them." The villagers fell silent, their faces pale. His words stung like a whip, each one a harsh truth they could not deny. "You pity the madman," Oba continued, "but you should pity yourselves. It is your greed that poisons this land, not me." The king's sorrow turned to fury. "Enough," he roared. "You have taken what cannot be replaced. Your life will end today, and the evil you have brought will end with you." With a swift motion, the guards carried out the king's command. Oba's laughter stopped, replaced by the quiet murmurs of the crowd. But his words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable, leaving the villagers ashamed and angry at themselves. The grief of Princess Adaora's death was a fire that burned in the hearts of the villagers. They could no longer ignore the shadow that had grown over Umuoko. Oba's words echoed in their minds, stirring both guilt and resolve. "We must destroy the ritualists," one elder said, his voice firm like iron. "They have feasted on our greed for too long." Led by the king's guards, the villagers marched into the forest. The trees loomed tall, their branches whispering secrets of old. Deep within, they found the small hut where Oba had delivered his gruesome goods. Inside, the ritualists waited, their faces twisted with shock as the crowd stormed in. "No more of your evil!" the villagers shouted. They tore down the hut, their anger bursting like a dam. The ritualists were captured, their tools of darkness destroyed. The forest, once a haven for their wickedness, was cleansed with fire and prayers. But even as they triumphed, the loss of Princess Adaora weighed heavy. Her kindness, her laughter, her light, all gone, leaving a wound that would never heal. The villagers returned to Umoko, their victory bitter with grief. From that day on, the people of Umoko vowed to never trust blindly again. They learned to question, to see beyond appearances, and to guard their hearts against greed. The tale of Oba, the madman with the sack of horrors, became a lesson for generations, a reminder of deceit, greed, and the price of blind trust. And so the story of Princess Adaora and the madman lived on, carried by the winds of Umuko, forever haunting the hearts of those who heard it. The tragic story of Princess Adaora and the madman Oba offers a profound lesson about the dangers of blind trust, unchecked greed, and the price of neglecting to question appearances. While kindness and compassion are virtues, they must be paired with wisdom and vigilance. Adaora's unwavering goodness, though admirable, became the very thing that blinded her to the lurking danger. Similarly, the greed of the villagers created a fertile ground for evil to thrive, allowing Oba and the ritualists to operate in the shadows. The tale warns us to remain cautious and discerning, to question what lies beneath the surface, and to address the flaws within our own communities before they lead to irreversible consequences. Most importantly, it teaches us to balance empathy with prudence, ensuring that our good intentions do not become an invitation for harm. Thank you for watching my channel. Be sure to explore more exciting and interesting videos available here. Stay tuned for even more amazing content. In the previous part, Chief Amara lived in a grand mansion with her two husbands, Ola and Jeed, where rumors about the strength and mysterious allure of the gate man, Kola, began to ripple through the household. What started as casual whispers soon spiraled into a vortex of curiosity, longing, and tangled emotions as both Ola and Jeed, despite their contrasting personalities, found themselves irresistibly drawn to Kola. From stolen glances and veiled questions to the suffocating tension of unspoken desires, the once tranquil household now simmered with an undercurrent of secrets poised to erupt at any moment. Let us delve into the next chapter of the story, where hidden truths surface, suppressed emotions overflow, and revelations threaten to change everything. But at that moment, the future was clear in their minds. Get Kola's attention and keep it no matter what. That same evening, the large house felt strangely quiet. Chief Amara was away on another trip, and the staff had finished most of their chores. The mansion's grandeur seemed muted, its high ceilings and polished floors exuding an eerie stillness. Ola stood by a window in the upstairs hallway. He watched the moon rise over the high walls, feeling a slight chill run through his arms. He wore a light robe over his pajamas, unsure if he should stay awake or go to bed early. Downstairs, he heard soft footsteps. He peeked over the banister and saw Kola. He was checking the locks on the front door. Normally, he did this routine check and then returned to his small room near the gate. But tonight, Ola felt a sudden urge to speak to him. He placed his hand on the rail and quietly walked down the stairs. Kola, he called in a low voice. When he reached the ground floor, the lights in the hallway were dim, making shadows dance on the walls. Kola turned, looking surprised. Sir, he said, is everything okay? Ola nodded, but stepped closer. He could hear his heart beating. I noticed a light in the garden flickering, he said, hoping to sound calm. Can you help me check it? Kola looked toward the back door. Yes, sir. Let me get a flashlight. Ola followed him outside into the cool night air. The garden was still and silent. Large lamps stood among the flowers, casting faint yellow circles on the ground. One lamp near the tall rose bushes blinked on and off. Ola led Kola, there pointing at the wires. Kola knelt down and fiddled with the small switch. It looks loose, he said, twisting it gently. We might need a new bulb. Ola folded his arms, pretending to watch the lamp, but in truth he was watching Kola's broad shoulders in the moonlight. He remembered the stories about his strength. He suddenly felt warm even though the night air was cool. After a moment, Kola stood up. I tightened it, sir. It should last until we get a new bulb tomorrow. Are you all right? Ola cleared his throat. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. He smiled, taking a half step closer. The soft smell of roses surrounded them. Kola looked at him, waiting for a signal to leave, but his eyes lingered on Kola, and he did not step back. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Ola reached out, almost without thinking, and touched his arm. I'm grateful for all your hard work, he said, his voice shaky. Kola swallowed, clearly unsure how to respond. Ola felt his heart pound even harder. Something about the night, the moonlight and the gentle darkness made him feel brave and scared at the same time. Before he could stop himself, he leaned in and pressed his lips to Kola's cheek. It was just a quick kiss, but it made his entire body tremble. Sir, Kola said softly, looking around as if worried someone might see them. Ola realized what he had done. He stepped back, his face warm. I'm sorry, he managed to say. But Kola surprised him by gently placing his hand on his shoulder. He looked into Ola's eyes, and in that brief moment, everything else disappeared. No one else in the big house mattered, only the two of them standing among the roses. They shared a slow, nervous kiss. A rush of feelings washed over them. Excitement, guilt, and a strange relief. It was as if both had been holding their breath for a long time. When they finally pulled away, their hearts were beating fast. Ola felt dizzy. He couldn't believe what he had done. He knew it was wrong, but he also felt more alive than ever. Kola glanced at the dark windows of the mansion, worried someone might catch them. I should go, he said quietly, stepping back. I have to wake up early tomorrow. Ola nodded, tears of confusion filling his eyes. He watched Kola slip back into the house, then out the front door toward his small room by the gate. He stood there for a few more minutes thinking about what just happened. Then he hurried inside, his mind racing. Early the next day, Jeed was full of energy. He had slept well, dreaming about finding a moment alone with Kola. He spent extra time picking out a bright shirt and brushing his hair. He wanted to look his best, though he told himself it was just a normal day. After breakfast, he asked Oak to drive him to the shops downtown, but he had a plan to return early, hoping to catch Kola off guard at the house. He bought a few groceries, some new slippers, and chatted with a friend. Then he rushed back home, making sure he arrived before noon. When Jeed entered the foyer, he noticed Ola was nowhere in sight. He guessed Ola might be upstairs or in another part of the mansion. He took a deep breath, heading straight for the back door that led to the storage room. Near the storage area, he saw Kola arranging some tools. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans which showed off his strong arms. Jide paused, letting his heart steady. Then he stepped forward with a smile. "Kola," he called, setting down a bag of vegetables. "I need your help. Can you carry these for me?" He turned around. "Of course, sir," he said. He picked up the bag with ease, his muscles flexing. Jeet glanced around to be sure no one was watching. "Follow me," he said, leading him to a small, unused corner of the storage room. There he opened a cupboard and placed the vegetables inside. Kola stood close behind him, waiting for instructions. The air felt thick and Jide could barely hear anything over the sound of his own heartbeat. "Thank you," he said, turning to face him. "I'm glad you're here. You always know how to help me." Kola shifted his feet. "I try my best, sir," he replied, not meeting his eyes. Jeed rested his hand lightly on his forearm. "Are you happy here, Kola, working so hard day and night?" He paused, then shrugged. "It's a good job, sir. Chief Amara pays well, and I don't have many complaints." Jeed smiled. "That's nice to hear." He realized his hand was still on Kola's arm, and his heart skipped a beat. He felt a sudden rush of courage. Stepping closer, he tilted his head. "Kola, do you ever get lonely in that small room by the gate?" He looked at him, eyes wide, as if he didn't know what to say. "Sometimes," he whispered. Jeed lifted his other hand and gently touched his shoulder. "I feel lonely too," he said in a quiet voice. "Chief Amara is away so much. He paused, noticing how Kola's breathing had changed. He could sense his nervousness, and it made his own nerves tingle. Without waiting for his reply, he stood on his toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, but then it grew bolder, fueled by the emptiness he'd felt for so long. He wrapped his arms around Kola's shoulders, and Kola held him for a moment. Time seemed to stop. When their lips parted, Jeed felt breathless. He looked into Kola's eyes, seeing a mix of surprise and longing. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor outside. Someone was passing by. They froze, holding their breath until the footsteps faded. Jeed giggled softly. "We should be careful," he said, his hands still resting on Kola's shoulders. He nodded quickly. "Yes, sir," he agreed, stepping back. "We can't let anyone see us." Jeet smoothed his shirt, trying to calm his heartbeat. "Thank you for your help," he said, lifting the grocery bag from the floor as if nothing unusual had happened. "I'll put these things away now." Kola swallowed and whispered, "I should return to my post." They exchanged a long look, and then Kola hurried off, slipping out the side door. Jide stayed behind, pressing his fingers to his lips. He felt a swirl of excitement and guilt in his stomach. That evening, Kola sat on his small bed in the gatehouse thinking about both encounters, one with Ola under the moon, another with Jide in the storage room. He never planned for any of this. It just happened. He felt happy and worried at the same time. If Chief Amara ever found out, Kola could lose his job, or worse. Still, he couldn't deny that being close to them sparked something inside him. They were both kind to him, and they were both so lonely. Kola had never imagined he would catch the attention of one husband, let alone two. It felt like a dream and also like a big secret he had to hide carefully. Meanwhile, Ola locked himself in his bedroom. He paced around, remembering how it felt to kiss Kola in the garden. He told himself it was just a moment of weakness, that he would not let it happen again. But deep inside, he knew he wanted more. He could still feel the press of his lips on his. Jide, sitting in the living room, also struggled to keep his face calm whenever staff walked by. His mind replayed the scene in the storage room. He wondered if Kola was thinking about him too. He told himself that no one could find out, not even Ola. He wanted Kola's affection all to himself, and so the mansion settled into night once again with three people holding a secret that could tear them apart. Ola, Jide, and Kola each felt a mix of excitement and fear. None of them realized this was only the beginning. Soon, their choices would lead to deeper desires, hidden lies, and consequences that nobody could stop. For now, though they each told themselves they could keep it under control, they believed no one else would find out, and that life would go on smoothly. If only they knew how their hearts and decisions would clash in the days ahead. But in this silent night, they allowed themselves a brief hope that everything would stay simple, that this new fire burning inside them would never be discovered. Ola woke one morning, feeling lightheaded and weak. His stomach felt uneasy, and he had trouble eating his usual breakfast. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just stress from the secrets he was keeping. But by the third day of feeling sick, he began to worry. He noticed he was also more tired than usual and guessed something might be happening with his body. He stood in front of his mirror, pressing a hand against his belly. Could I be pregnant? The thought made his heart race. Chief Amara had been away for a while, and he couldn't remember the last time he was truly close to her. If he really was pregnant, it would raise questions. He thought of Kola and felt both excitement and fear. That same day, Jide was also having strange symptoms. He felt dizzy in the mornings and certain smells made him feel like throwing up. He paced around his room wondering if it was something he ate. But his period was late, and a scary thought crept into his mind. What if I'm pregnant too? Jide didn't tell anyone right away. He knew if he asked the family doctor to visit Ola or the staff might notice. So he decided to handle it quietly. He planned to see a private doctor in town the next time he went out. Meanwhile, he tried to act normal, but his eyes kept drifting to his belly whenever he passed a mirror. A few days later, Ola found a chance to speak with the same private doctor he had seen once before. The doctor was known for not asking too many questions. He made an excuse to go shopping and slipped into the doctor's small clinic. After a brief check, the doctor gave him the news. He was indeed pregnant. Ola's heart pounded. He felt both happy and worried. As he left the clinic, he whispered to himself, It must be Kola's child. He closed his eyes for a moment, leaning against the wall. He thought of how sweet Kola had been and how gentle his touch felt. But the danger of Chief Amara finding out terrified him. He placed a hand on his belly and told